afternoon, good evening, wherever you're consuming this broadcast. Welcome to Bus Talk. My name is Ian, and I host Bus Talk every other week, where we talk about everything everyday workplace issues, try to break down complex stuff and make it as simple as possible, and see if it makes sense to you. There are no instant gratifications, no three things that will change your life or give you a promotion or any of that sort. In fact, it is a slow burn monologue, no star guests, and often runs into tangents. Now, if you're still listening to all this, you're probably an introvert. Well, even if you're not, you probably prefer, or you've got tired of all the BS and the noise that goes around, and probably you want to hear something with no frills and no shrills. In which case, you've tuned into the right show. Thank you so much for being you, and thank you for finding Bus Talk relevant to so much so that you want to spend the next 30-40 minutes with me on this journey. With the pleasantries away, a short disclaimer, and which I keep doing. There's an episode on disclaimer, but nevertheless, none of the content that is shared on Bus Talk is any endorsement or agreement between any of my past, present, or future professional engagements, i.e., my employers or at the workplace, right? And take it in the right spirit, right? Much of the content that I share is strictly personal, and I curate a lot of stuff that is going around on in my network, in the set of people that I meet, and therefore try to infer, and not necessarily from the very recent past, but it could be earlier as well. And I draw from my experience of the last 25 years, traveling globally and meeting so many fascinating and inspiring leaders and people. And so do not associate any of these, any of the stuff that you hear on Bus Talk with my employers. Well, with that disclaimer and introduction and pleasantries out of the way, let's dive into today's episode. As always, I have something very fascinating, and this is going to be one of those episodes which will make you sit up and think, not just think of you as a person, but you and your environment. So, who is it for? Primarily, it is for those people who are in some kind of a leadership role. You could be an early manager, which means you've just become a people manager. It could be very relevant if you're a seasoned manager. And clearly, if you're a very senior leader, it could make sense to you as well. It could also not make sense, given the fact that you will have your own convictions, your own belief systems. And I certainly don't mean to challenge or change that. If something's working for you, as always, continue to do that, and nothing wrong with that. I think the purpose of Bus Talk is to make sure that you get a chance to revisit and rethink some of the things that you're already doing or have done in the past, and some of you who have not done it and are about to in the future. Maybe you have some better reference to context. So by the time you exit the episode, you will be like, I think I may need to revisit this, and that's it. And if you also exit saying, well, I'm already doing it and I'm all set, that's fine too. So in today's episode, so if you're a leader, even if you're not a leader, right? If you're working with one, you will identify with this content quite a lot. And I have done a previous episode, I forget in which season. It's to do with the God complex. God complex has many variations depending on intensity, context, workplace, leadership, psychology, pop culture, whichever way you look at it. So there are lots of variations, and I'm going to walk you through some of the variations of the God complex and see if it fits you. Are you doing it? Are you one of them who is experiencing it or exporting it? I don't know. And so let's start. Like, there are about 10 of them. So let me see if I can first touch upon all the 10, and then we'll dive deep into them one by one. So the top variant for me is the Messiah complex. Belief that one is destined to, quote unquote, save the people, save the team. And had it not been for you, then the team would sink. Like maybe a CEO thinking only they can rescue, in air quotes, the company, ignoring all the collective efforts. And then comes the time when they were probably not available and the company still did well, or the team still did well. But we'll come to that. But that's the Messiah complex. Next, you have the hero complex. And that is, I think, more prevalent in our society, I believe, is like always needing to be the savior in every crisis, even if unnecessary. Now, example, a manager stepping in to solve problems just to look indispensable. The business has its own pace, business has its own timing, but here you might have someone, and it could be you, just swooping in and saying, look, I don't think it's happening at the right pace. Let me show you how it is done smarter, better, quicker, faster, because if you're not fast, you're food. And so it's the hero complex, right? uh, the next part of it, I was about to say subset, not necessarily a subset. An extension of that is the perfectionist complex. Convinced only they can do things correctly, refusing delegation. Hey, you don't know how to do this. You're such, that's a lackadaisical effort, or that's a clumsy work that you guys do, shoddy work. The leader who micromanages every single slide deck. Like, you made the slide deck, it works, but oh, you missed the dot there, you missed the T there. That spacing is like 1.5 there and 1 there. Yeah. Technically not wrong. Technically not wrong. And that's what they justify to themselves. Look, I'm not doing anything which is illegal or illogical. It is the right way to do it. And if I am tightening it up, what's wrong with that? So that's the perfectionist in them speaking and countering the interference. Next, control complex. Obsessed with dictating every decision because they believe only their way is correct. Now, as you would imagine, in modern times, there are multiple ways to reach the destination. But oftentimes we find leaders who are very prescriptive. Say, hey, don't get intelligent on me. Here are the three things you do, and that's it. Now, it cuts both ways, and we'll come to the other side. By the way, just as a side note, sidebar, all that I'm saying, it has an equal and opposite angle to the story as well. And that's how gray people management, people leadership is globally anywhere. So it's not like it shouldn't come across to you as a one-sided story. So there, I will touch upon, even the leader's perspective or the other perspective, the both pros and cons of the situation. For now, I'm just listing the complexes so that you understand the context better. So control complex, obsessed with dictating every decision because they thought that is the only way, my way or the highway. Narcissist complex. Oh my, that is also, I notice that a lot these days. Overestimation of self-importance. In the popular words of Mr. Nawazuddin Siddiqui, said Apunij Bhagwan hai. And if you have not seen Sacred Games, then I strongly recommend you do. Even if you don't follow the language, read the subtitles. Essentially, that phrase means Apunij Bhagwan hai. That means I think I'm God. Metaphorically is what the context was at the time, because the protagonist felt that they are the whole and soul of that situation. So the narcissist complex is the overestimation of self-importance. But do they know it's overestimation? That's another question. Often needing validation and admiration. So they love people who suck up to them, who praise them, flattery. Boss, that's a great shirt that you're wearing. Boss, that is like, what a decision. Amazing. I couldn't have, those guys, some of them have just perfected flattery. They make it sound so convincing. Like, you know what? I couldn't have done it. I tried really hard, but you made it happen. Oh my God, that is good. And it sounds so authentic. And you almost, had you not known the person's history and background, or the sniggers after, There are some naughty ones out there who make a very authentic compliment in front of the boss, and when the boss is gone, they laugh behind the back and they crack up completely. And so, only to underscore the narcissist complex at the leadership level. So, it can happen to anybody, not necessarily a leader, to be fair. The Think of those like even at an individual contributor level, a sales rep who's or the star employee who takes credit for the whole target, like it's me who did it. I made sure that I own the relationship with the customer, I own this, I delivered this, and had it not been for me, this deal wouldn't have come in, and so on and so forth. They try to be polite about it sometimes, but mostly land up failing at that. And eventually, the real, did you know what it took for me to get the deal? Or the variations of this phrase eventually find their way into everyday vocabulary, even if you're at the cafeteria having a cup of coffee. It was so easy to get you guys can have coffee cups, day after day, and I don't even get time to drink water because I was focusing on the deal. Okay, so those are the situations, right? And then next, immortality or invincibility complex, very closely related, believing they can't fail, be wrong, or face any consequences. Oftentimes, by quirk of fate or organizational structure or design, too much power accumulates with one person, and with no immediate oversight, they often survive because of utility, because there's an utilitarian value to that position more than the talent of that person. That the person is needed in that role because of the utility that they bring to the table. Utility could be signing documents, utility could be signing, responding to notices, utility could be, administrative, clerical, it could be many other facets to the story. it it often happens that when they are in a particular position for a longish period of time, the immortality or invincibility complex comes in or kicks in, maybe unknowingly, that everything has to go through them because there's nobody else. Had there been somebody else, then they would have probably managed to do it. But since that is not the case, everything is, they believe that it is they, the supreme being, immortality, like invincibility, like they can't fail because that's what they do. They've been doing this for the last 30 years, and so they can't be wrong. And what will happen? I know. Go ahead and see. If somebody wants to say something about me, go and say, let's see what happens. That kind of almost arrogance. And so it's an example. I mean, history is replete with such examples. Remember when Mr. Balmer said, responded, I think Microsoft was introducing June. This is a Zune, rather, the music device. And I think iPod had just uh, caught everyone's fancy, and they kind of almost said, how, what does that matter? And I don't see how it'll work out, or something on those lines. I'm just paraphrasing here. And so, leaders ignoring market signals until collapse, right? And see what happened. The rest is history. Next, moral superiority complex, thinking their values, ethics, and vision are the only right ones. Again, you see very little difference from the above complexes, but there are separate examples of this. My culture is the best, everyone else is wrong. Don't follow these people, they don't understand the complexities, only I know. And closely tied to the invincibility complex. Then next is the visionary complex, overinflating their ideas as revolutionary. Sometimes a simple product or service could be presented as, oh my God, this is as complicated as moon landing on the South Pole. You don't know, thinking their ideas are revolutionary while dismissing practical feedback. Like a startup founder chasing unrealistic moonshots. Why? Because they did hear from other people that, hey, you should aim for the stars. If you miss, you land up on the moon, or something cringy as that. And so um, what do you want to do? Yeah, I'm going to have 2 million customers in 1 year, something like that, right? And so it's like the visionary complex. They often miss ground reality despite it screaming and staring at their face. Next is the savior syndrome in teams. Team members who believe that the group can't function without them. Oh, that's very close to the narcissist complex. And again, like I mentioned, multiple overlaps here, but uh, it is with those people who are MVPs and who have consistently been performing, and they run the risk of often finding themselves thinking that if I left this team would sink, this business would sink. They forget that the team existed before they came and likely exist after they leave, and people just move on and forget about their last employee. Like, when was the last time your previous organization remembered you? That is the biggest thing, right? You must have been a star employee in your previous organization, as is the case in every interview, isn't it? How are you doing in your current job? Oh, I'm due a promotion. I just got promoted. I just did so well. And so, well, if you're doing so well, then why look for a job? Oh, I'm looking for more challenges. And you're like, yeah, right. So the savior syndrome, right? And so these some members often think that they are the saviors, and again tied to messiah complex as well. Last but not the least, I'm sure there are other variants as well. The parental complex, treating colleagues as children. ये तो मेरे बच्चे हैं, my family, my kids. My team is like my family, and who need guidance in every move. They don't know what to do. I will show them how it is done. A manager policing from in time, tone, even emails, as if running a household. Almost like, you will see them strutting the corridor with their hands behind the back, almost like a teacher, or like a professor walking the corridor and students following, or like the chicks following the duck or whatever. That's the visual that came to my mind. And they treat, even in their forecast reviews, they try to present themselves as the senior one, the guider, the leader, the parent who will take care of the child or the children. Who else will take care of them, right? And so each of these complexes can tie into your everyday workplace behavior, could be leadership and team dynamics. And so it's very important to address these. And so let's see how we can address this if you face some of these challenges. Now let's switch gears, as I promised that there are two sides to the story, or three sides to the story: your version, my version, and the truth. So you heard from the one side of the complex, and mostly addressed to leaders. But also, let's hear from the leader what their thought is with respect to these complexes. And then you will have both sides of the argument, and then you probably will be in a better position. Again, remember, there's no right or wrong, and probably there is a threshold uh, beyond which it will become wrong. But I'm going to share those same 10 examples now, from not necessarily justifying these complexes, but giving you a perspective that, well, did you know this also happens? So let's go back to the hero complex. I must always save the day is the tagline, right? So the scenario is a sales manager takes over every closing call, not letting the reps learn. The team stops growing because the leader hogs every hero moment. The consequence? Short term wins, of course, but long term dependency and team frustration. It also burns you out, it as a leader, because it's not scalable, it's not sustainable. You can do it for some time, but beyond that, it will fatigue in. So, what is the leader's version of this? Why do you need to be the hero at times? Sometimes, in we are all under pressure, we are all under timelines, we are all under deadlines. Not everything can be shared with you on the future, you as in the individual contributor in the team or the junior in the team. You might be a people manager yourself. So sometimes after explaining things, people don't understand. Look, I've given examples. I've tried to have a one on one and explain to them multiple times, and they just don't get it. And now, how long do I risk this? And if it fails, then it fails, right? I also get impacted as a leader. And so sometimes people are also looking for inspiration. You would be surprised. There are lots of people who walk up to leaders and say, I've never seen a leader roll up their sleeves and come to the field and come to the trenches with us and fight out the battle. And those who do, hands-on leaders, quote unquote, tend to be great leaders that people eventually like. See, you see this thin line that separates these complexes. On one hand, it could become highly interfering and micromanagement. And on the other hand, for some, it could actually be very inspirational. Like, oh my God, I've never seen a leader being so hands on. This has really inspired me to do well. Next, the perfectionist complex. Only I can do it right. A marketing head micromanages every slide of the pitch deck, rejecting team drafts for not being perfect. Deadline slips, more crashes, the presentation doesn't go well, consequence of burnout for the leader and disengagement with their team. Now, it's to do with presenting an image of your company either to a customer or an audience. Why would you not be particular about it? Why would you have a quote unquote chalta hai, like, it's okay, a casual attitude? Wouldn't your customer, I mean, think of this, right? A classic example is you pay a ton of money to buy an iPhone. What if they came back and said, yeah, this button is metallic on one side and plastic on the other? What would you say? Would you like it? You would like it. You'd reject it right away. Say, no, I want everything titanium or aluminum or what have you. Or the OS, where only the home page has got the nice graphics and UI, but when you scroll down further, it looks like a second generation software or something. Would you then pay money for it or the top dollar for it? Answer is no, you won't. So yes, perfectionism is frustrating at times. Even in the, think of this, right? In the startup economy or the startup vocabulary, you have MVP, minimum viable product. Minimum viable product is sans perfection. It does not have any perfection. It's like the least common denominator that ensures the investor that this model will work. Here is the end to end cycle. Here is how it works and eventually might generate revenue or money. That is what they call the classic scrappy mode. Get scrappy and get going. Now, you can be scrappy up when you are, starting on or whatever. But will anybody blame you if you have a finished product? No, they won't. They would love it. Like, oh my God, this is a near finished product. So if a leader spends some time trying to perfect a slide deck, is that something so bad? Right? You want to make a great impression to the audience, to the people, to the customer, whoever, and you want them to remember. It's a lasting impression because the odds of your competitor also doing the same job is uh, is quite high, in the sense they could also be doing, or it could be in a situation where they looked into all the attention to detail, and you didn't. You lost the deal right there. And so these are real examples. So if somebody's trying to iron out all the small anomalies, the alignments, get some symmetry into your deck, then maybe that's not such a bad thing, right? Next, the control complex, my way or the highway or no way. Uh, The project lead ignores the team input during a big RFP, insists on their winning formula, and which eventually flops because they dismissed newer ideas or a newer approach. And then they, go to town saying, well, the customer changed and this happened and that happened. It results in a frustration with the team, and of course, you lose business. So it's the control complex. They want to control everything. So, what's the flip side to the story? The flip side to the story is many a times projects tend to go haywire because everybody's trying to put in extra efforts, and sometimes it's not in the right direction. And then you realize the time is just getting wasted, people exploring multiple things, whereas what you need to deliver is within a time frame, and you deliver basis what has worked in so far. There is some merit in looking into historicals and say, hey, it has worked so far, and so why would it not work again? Yes, there could be a chance that it could have worked better, but then endlessly intellectualizing it and and going all over the place to come up with a better solution, you miss the basics. So sometimes leaders step in and say, let me show you how it is done. And yes, if they miss the trick, then it does hurt, but then that's also, you will realize the odds of that happening are relatively low. It's not like a very rampant thing that it's happening every time some leader presents the same thing that they'd done 2 years earlier. It falls flat or flops. So there is an element of doubt there as well. Next, savior complex. They can't survive without me. Think of this like a HRBP. Personally intervenes in every employee grievance, bypassing processes, creates a dependency culture where no one takes any other ownership. The people almost use feedback as a weapon. Yeah, those 360-degree feedbacks and those forums that are there, people instead of almost like sounding out, they use it as a weapon against the manager, all because, or the leader, all because the manager had a disciplinary or a tough love conversation with them, and the HR trying to hear the voice of the lowest common denominator or the individual contributor or people below, tend to forget the complexity of running the team, and they think that if I don't solve this, how else will anybody solve it, right? So they try to play the savior. uh, Oftentimes the flip side of the story is that it is true that there are a lot of nasty managers out there, very very nasty. A lot of managers, I mean leaders in powerful positions, use abuse their power, their position, the situation. And had there been no HRBP, had there been no voice to listen, a person to talk, or a ear to listen, then the workplace would be a very very difficult place to be in, as was the case when none of these existed, right? Go back 25, 30 years, where even a regular conversation in a team meeting could explode into abuses and cuss words and everything. And so there was no sanctity or sanity to the conversation because it was absolutely unhinged. And people could pretty much say, it's my team, you want the end results, and I do it the way I want to do it. And for many many years that was the culture, until these mechanisms started to take effect, where the individual contributors or people in lower positions were able to find a platform to either speak up or give a voice, and so that it could be heard. Now there is a counter argument to that also. There is an emotional voice and an objective voice. More often than not, it is the emotional outburst. It's a vent, it's a rant, and that's when it becomes almost like weaponizing feedback. And rarely, or less, I wouldn't say rarely is a wrong term, but less frequently is absolutely objective, where there is statistics, facts, data. And not to say that one discounts the emotional abuse angle of it. Of course, there is an emotional angle to it, and it's very difficult unless you have reference to context, because both sides of the story could be true. The manager is trying to probably discipline someone who just keeps drifting away, and this person might feel that they are being admonished, they are being punished just because they are a little different. So it's a very difficult, what's the right word? Difficult balance between both sides, and a mature HRBP will understand the reference to context from a business standpoint, from a practicality standpoint, and of course be empathetic from an employee standpoint, saying, look, this is how we need to listen to them as well. So this balance is very tricky. Next, the visionary complex. Only I see the future clearly. The startup founder rejects the market data and insists on gut feel, pushes the company into a situation which no one wants, only because they think it's they have a strong hunch about it. And of course, they give some examples on how hunches have worked in previous life in different situations. And so, very hard to argue when you are at the helm of affairs. The flip side of the story is, yes, there have been instances where people have gotten wrong, but gut feels have also proven to be right. And it sometimes defeats logic and data. And that's also true. The probabilities are lesser, no doubt, but one can't rule it out completely. Right? So think of this, right? When iPod was being launched, Sony's Walkman was the biggest thing. You had got everything covered. You could hear CD quality music, high fidelity sound. The wires were beautiful. The colors were nice. And it was very trendily designed. It was, the product of its times. But then iPod came along, and it was like this small little round device with almost no buttons. And people would, many people would have thought, that won't work. And well, I won't go into the cliche, but rest is history. As was the case with many things. Like, think of how long BlackBerry persisted with the buttons, and how long Nokia refused to upgrade to something different. They kept on improving. I think N95 was what their latest and best. I don't know if there were any further great big innovations and all. They were only increasing buttons and not thinking something out of the box. And so the gut feel there for many investors of the time, many new players of the time, many leaders, many think tanks thought, this buttonless thing won't work. What is this iPhone thing? But it took the world by storm, and it almost like an era defining. And now, of course, one can argue it's an exception, right? How many times in history has that happened? So it's an exceptional moment. You have to give you that. But good hunches tend to work from time to time. Next, the immortality, invincibility complex, believing you can't fail, you can't be wrong, you don't face consequences. People becoming too much power resting on one person. And so the flip side of that is, well, if you didn't do this, the next person would, isn't it? Because the utility quotient is important. If you didn't do it, somebody else will. So then what choice do you have but to fulfill the utility? Right? If you are the signatory of a company, if you are the head of that region, and you have three things to accomplish, then that's what you do. And yes, it could make you feel that a sense of power because you're the authorized face of the company, but it also comes with a lot of riders. It also comes with a lot of guidelines. There is a communications guideline, there is a media guideline. You get media trained. You cannot speak anything and everything. You're authorized to say only that many things. And that's why many leaders are very careful on being on social media, because whatever we say could be misconstrued, misrepresented. So there is no point of there's no recourse if someone just explodes and says, "Oh my God, how could this leader say something like that?" And then it becomes like a social media, and people often abuse this, right? For uh, lack of a better expression, they abuse the social media platform which is given to engage and interact. They use it for almost personal vendettas, and, oh, I didn't get this license free, or I didn't get something when I'd asked for, and look, this person is now commenting about how to have better customer experiences. And then you're like, dude, give me a break. So yes, the invincibility complex comes to you because you are at that position of power, but it also comes with a lot of riders, and it's almost like straight jacketed roles sometimes, that you cannot go beyond that very few people know or understand. Next, the visionary complex, overinflating ideas as revolutionary, dismissing practical feedback. And again, examples of the startup founder, where the vision of the year is something seems like a borrowed vision from last year. Now, the other side of the story there is, you are, like I said before, there is very little deviation that you can do. And so people don't get that. Leaders don't get to share the constraints they work, because the fundamental premise that a leader operates under is that you get the job done in spite of or despite the constraints. If there were no constraints, then why have a leader in the first place, right? Why not? The thing would navigate, float on its own, but it doesn't. And so the leader has to navigate while the constraints are there. So sometimes the ideas might not sound, oh my God, so exciting. It might sound downright predictable and boring, but you know what? Maybe the market likes predictability. Market responds well to programmatic behavior. They do not like erratic behavior or erratic fluctuations. Like, that's why if you have heard earnings call, the word that they use is guidance. That whenever the earnings per share land up within those guidelines or guidances, then that is, and it happens periodically or predictably, the share prices go up, the valuation of the company goes up, because then the market starts to feel confident that these guys know what they're talking about, versus having a skyrocketing quarter and then crashing the next and then doing something else. So that fluctuation is not appreciated. So when you as an individual is listening to yet another Q1 spiel that, come on, let's get it done, just put yourself in their shoes and say, what would you do differently? What new message would you give? It's an organization that you need to run. It's the same thing that you need to do, like get off the blocks quicker, right? People often spend 3 weeks coming back into the momentum after the year has ended, but those 3 weeks lost, catching up for the rest of the quarter of the year becomes incredibly difficult, and so that's lost revenue and productivity. And so it is important to understand that when you find something repetitive and boring, you also have to be sensitive to the leader, that there isn't much that they can say any differently. Like, let's go to Mauritius, instead of spending time restarting our business as quick as possible. Okay. Last two, savior syndrome in teams. The team members who believe that the group can't function without them. Sometimes it is also a sense of responsibility. People tend to weigh themselves down, saying, I have to step up if others are not stepping up. And many a times these people are not vocal enough. And if they are doing stepping up every single time, not just like a flash in the pan or once in a quarter or whatever, if they've done so for a significantly long period of time, then it's not completely improbable to think that their contribution is important, it's significant, it's making an impact. And it also often happens when there isn't enough appreciation for the impact that they bring to the table. So, in some sense, they are compelled to verbalize it, because they feel that despite me doing all the heavy lifting, somehow it's being dismissed as BAU, business as usual. And so it necessitates them to speak up and say, hey, well, if I don't tell them, how will they know? And nobody else is doing that for me. Right. And therefore, remember, I speak about this in multiple other episodes. Have you spent time building your brand within the department, within the company? Do people know you over and above your immediate team or immediate next door team? Right. If not, then that's one of the things you could get started. Last but not the least, the parental complex, treating colleagues like children who need guidance in every move. And you are the mother of all or the father of all, and these guys will follow your instructions just like small little children do. This is a societal or a cultural aspect. In India, largely it's an emotional society. I guess many places are, but certainly lesser than our Western counterparts. I do not to say that the Western teams are not do not have any emotions. They do, but as compared to India, they are slightly different. India, there is a thing of protection, that let me take care of you, and in the positive sense. It's not always from a overbearing sense all the time, that let me take care of you. Look, I don't want you to fall into a ditch. The role is to guide you, to help you navigate, dodge past that pothole, and not let you fall in the pothole and say, see, I told you not to go there, or see how it hurt you. That could be a style somewhere, because then people, once they get hurt, they learn faster and quicker, and many people break down because they feel, well, you were the leader, why didn't you warn me? I mean, there have been many instances. Like, there was a situation where before QBR, there were two sets of managers. One manager, and they would coach their team saying, well, it's a QBR, you are on your own, and you're going to be in front of senior leadership, my skip levels. So it's your opportunity to showcase yourself. And many times these people misread the room, and came back to that leader and said, why, you could have told me that this was not the expectation. And they said, no, 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 you had to figure out your own shit. When will you do that? On the other hand, the other manager coached every last detail, and their teams tend to speak exactly the leadership, whatever the leadership wanted to hear. And they came back to him and saying, wow, had you not told me all of this, I would have made a complete ass of myself in front of the leadership. So thank you so much. But in the process, they also become very dependent on them, right? So this, the parental nature comes from that standpoint, that why let your team down when there is a position to help them, versus letting them be so that they can learn on their own. And both, there will be many theories behind it. Like, you are not running a school, you're not running an educational institution, you're a professional organization leading a bunch of professionals who ought to deliver what they're supposed to. They're contracted to, obligated to, paid to do that. Absolutely right. But ideal and practical, the stories are very different. In ground realities, and I know many leaders hate hearing that. Like, what are you telling me? I don't know ground realities. But sometimes the ground realities are such that you as a leader are entrusted to not risk anything and get the stuff done. And so you often take up the parental mode and saying, let me show you, let me take care of you, let me walk you down that path. And many team members respond to that. They kind of, they're also tired of nasty managers abusing them or saying hard words to them. So they often take to that style of leadership. Does it always work? Perhaps not. So yeah, so that was the other side of the story for all these complexes. And so I hope it gives you a certain sense on how complex this complex is, right? The God complex does, in conclusion, right? In conclusion, the God complex does feel very powerful, but true leadership means making yourself less indispensable. You almost like you are the fallback option rather than leading function, and you enable the team to do well while taking a bit of everything. And I know that's the most difficult thing to do. At sometimes you've got to be the parent, at sometimes the coach, sometimes the hard taskmaster, sometimes the disciplinarian, and sometimes the friend that they can hang out in a bar and have a drink and say, can you tell me what's going on? And that is a function of time, trust, that you can. So anybody trying to tell you that leadership is these three things is probably not a leader. Let's put it that way. It's a mix of so many emotions, so many facts, so much of data, so much of practices, so many practices. And it takes a long time to mature as a people manager, which is why I always humbly suggest that if you are given an opportunity to lead a team, take it very seriously, and preferably a little later in your career rather than early on in your career. When I say little later, maybe after the 10-year mark, 11-year mark, then you have a little more stable and maturity. You have a little more understanding of how the world works, and you've gone through a cycle of ups and downs yourself. So you're in a slightly better position, and you can test the waters and see, are you warming up to managing people, or are you better as an individual contributor? Well, that's all the time I had for this episode. I mean, I could go on for a lot because there's so much to talk about. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. Do you identify with some of these? Does it make sense to you? Does it not? Either ways, leave me a note, comment. The best way to reach me is on BusTalk, www.bastalk.in. Leave a voice message. Actually, you can leave a voice message. Or on Ionisms, AAYANISMS on platform X. You can find me on LinkedIn on IN/INBAN. And if you want to be part of the WhatsApp group on Bus Talk, just let me know, drop a note, and I will, and you to be okay to sharing your phone number so that I can add you on that group where you will get all this content a little earlier than others. Nothing majorly different, and some discussions sometimes. Idea is not to spam you or inundate you with more information. Until we meet the next time, please, please, please stay safe, stay well, keep listening to Bus Talk. My name is Ian, and I'm wishing you a great week ahead.